Hey, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this 95th edition of Clarity Chat. Today's Clarity Chat is with Sanjay Prasad, CIO of CESC. Hi, Sanjay.
Hi, hello.
Welcome to Clarity Chat.
Yes, thank you for having me in.
Yeah, no, lovely having you with us. You know, we know each other for a long time, and I was like, why haven't I invited Sanjay so far? That was the feeling when I just thought of your name. Well, Sanjay is an alumnus of XLRA Jamshedpur, and oh, okay. So he's an IT leader with 38 years of experience, having worked with Tata Motors, Hindustan Unilever, Colgate Palmolive, Citigroup, TCS, Tata Power, and now CESC Power Group. So it's a diverse range of industries and geographies, and we will come to that in a bit. So he has experience in digital and cybersecurity framework enablement, IT/OT integration, ERP deployment, and innovation governance across power and utilities, consumer goods, automotive, banking, BFSI, and coupled with management of business technology services spanning multiple geos across North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific, which has given him a very, very holistic perspective of business cultures and industries. So he has done CIO stints as well as PNL stints, and is now working on a diversified 22,000 crore group, which is growing legacies, uh, which is growing across six business sectors. So, Sanjay, would you like to tell us a little bit about the CSC Power Group?
Yeah, thank you, Jagdish, once again. देर है लेकिन दुरुस्त है. This is, I believe, is a 95th edition. I thought 100 पे out होंगे. थोड़ा like Sehwag got out 5 runs before the century. Nevertheless. CSC Power Group is an integrated power utility, both in the generation as well as in the distribution space. In a generation perspective, it has presence in obviously several parts in West Bengal and in Maharashtra. With respect to distribution, it's largely present in Kolkata, Greater Noida, parts of Rajasthan, and Malegaon is a district in Maharashtra. We also have a license for one of the large North Indian capital city, but that's still in a work in progress. So if you look at from the industry that I'm in, what we call it's at the cusp of deregulation. We call it I at least call it utility 3.0, with expecting the consumer to have the benefit of choice, like you have in the telecom sector. So, like many other industries which are going through this flux, the utility industry is driven by 4 Ds, which is essentially digitalization, decarbonization, decentralization, and de-risk. So, de-risk means more of cybersecurity. So, and of course, it's all underpinned by deregulation. So it's no more the pensioners' paradise which utility 1.0 used to be for any power industry. So there's a lot of action that's expected to happen in the months and years to come.
Awesome, awesome. So I think deregulation and giving customer choices. I think that's what is driving the evolution in the industry. So that's great. Thanks, Sanjay, for enlightening us on the industry itself, not just the group. Our chat with Sanjay will discuss about lessons in perception versus reality and empathy, uh, embracing a holistic and ecosystem approach, the entrepreneurship lessons. He did a 50 million PNL, and it's heartening to know that like being a career CIO, he managed a PNL and what were the lessons there. And then, very importantly, the cultural adaptability, practicing a few cardinal management beliefs which he will share with us, and contributing to the industry agenda as an influencer. It's always a stretch, but he will talk about, he'll give us a more holistic perspective of it. Okay. So, Sanjay, before we start talking of serious things, let's get some energy going up. Okay. Share with us one of the funniest incidents that happened with you. I believe it happened in Bangladesh.
So I wouldn't call it funny. It was expected. It was an opening meeting of a systems audit. It was expected to be an ice breaker, but it sort of solidified into a still silence for a couple of, about a few seconds. So that was my first overseas trip, and we were doing a program, South Asia program, and Bangladesh was first in line. And so, as part of the conversation, I was trying to explain, while this is a South Asian responsibility, how going to the Western neighbor is a challenge. And especially the timing was such, it was just 2 decades past their liberation date, Bangladesh as a country. And then I could see the sense in the room where hurriedly I was reintroduced to the specific management committee member who happened to be the expert from that particular country that I referenced. So, what was the lesson here? It was seemingly an innocuous discussion where I was trying to, get into the skin of, the country that I was in. But it is very important to know the individual stakeholders were sitting on the table prior to getting into a discussion. So that was a very important input that I learned it the hard way.
That's a great lesson actually. In a global multi-country, multicultural world, you cannot be you cannot be bringing either religion or politics or geopolitics, whatever, in the room, because you don't know who belongs to which country, which culture, etc., etc., right? So it's always better to be focused on the professional aspects. I actually got that lesson myself once I posted on LinkedIn. I actually commented on LinkedIn about something happening in the US politics, and I then got a private message by one of my well wishers saying that, Jagdish, you know what, G is a American corporation and a multinational company. We do not know, you know what kind of affiliations and what kind of, like, how your comments may affect the company. So better to steer clear. So, but that's like, a sort of funny incident that you ended up, like, congratulating the Bangladeshi freedom, and there was somebody who was on the other side of the geography. um, well, let's move on then. I think that's an interesting one, but there's a good lesson in that, definitely. So thanks for sharing that, Sanjay. So let's come back to our audience, for whom me and Sanjay are there. So we have CXOs, founders, IT managers, and seasoned technology industry leaders in the audience. All of us know that technology is necessary but not sufficient to drive business performance. The guests like Sanjay on Clarity Chat, we have built the bridge between the necessary and sufficient with their art of managing technology. Clarity Chat builds the bridge between their learnings and all of you, uh, who all are trying to make a powerful impact with technology. So thank you all for joining us for the last 94 episode, and this is the 95th, and soon we will be 100 long, and encouraging us with your interactions, questions, and engagement. If none of you were attending this, we wouldn't have come here. So very heartfelt thanks to all of you. Before we go forward, I would request all my audience to make their presence felt. Right now, it seems like me and Sanjay are there. So once you tell us, just put in the comment section of YouTube or LinkedIn, where are you joining from, and just introduce yourself. That will get some interaction going here. So meanwhile, let us see who all have joined here. We have Debashis Mukherjee. Seems like your colleague, Sanjay, or an
Uh,
ex-colleague.
no, I'm not able to see from here. Yeah, could be, but yes, it's a very infectious industry. So yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's how celebrities are. People know them, they may not know people. And we have Niti Wahi, and she says practical lessons of work life. Of course, Niti, that's what you get on Clarity Chat. No gyan, only practical stories, life stories, and experiences. We also have Charan Narang joining us from Mumbai, and Niti says that she is from Sterlite Power. Okay, let's move on, guys. Keep your comments coming. Make your presence felt here. Just encourages us. So, Sanjay, can you recount your journey? Um, you know, Different stints, what obstacles you faced, and what you learned from them. Just a 5 minute, bird's eye view of your career. We'll go deeper into the other areas later, but for now, just to give a picture to the audience.
Yeah, it's actually quite a convoluted one, starting with uh, a company both of us are familiar with, Tata Motors, and those were the formative years when I went through the life cycle of software as a software development professional. COBOL, DMS, ISOM files, 24GL, RDBMS, Unix. We didn't have an ERP at that point, but very strong, robust internal platforms. And there is an incident which we'll come back to later on, a Foxborough incident when we go deep into it. Then obviously moved to consumer goods, which is Hindustan Lever. The difference was moving from customer custom built applications to a product with minimal customization. So of course, got deep learning into how conference room pilots are held, and to make sure that the best of business processes are which are ingrained in an ERP are actually taken in for an implementation for a quick, robust, and uh, business-like implementation. So this is where obviously the business alignment was something that that came to the fore, and it got accentuated further when I moved to Colgate, which was actually moving cities from Bangalore to Mumbai, and at the same time moving from a distributed ERP, which was earlier MFG Pro in Hindustan Lever, uh, ended up with working in SAP as a centralized instance. Of course, that SAP itself was an incentive to move cities, and being a beta customer, we had deep insights into how the product worked, and that stood us in good stead. We also founded at that point of time what is the India Users Group, SAP India Users Group, known as Indus. And who were the partners in this? It was Tata Motors, Mahindra and Mahindra, and there were a few others. So then, from after that implementation was moved to a post-implementation regional Y2K role, which was very close to the turn of the century. Happened to work in several subsidiaries within the Asia Pacific, as disparate as from China, Thailand, Vietnam, Taiwan, Philippines, Singapore, Malaysia, and back to Pakistan. So this time I could make a visit to Pakistan.
Oh,
And
awesome.
then a sort of the dot-com bug which had hit many people. I also spent a year, unfortunately, joined at the peak, learning. Don't Never like the stock market. Never try to time the market. And but it was a very good learning where things like dignity of labor came to the fore, and you being the last one to bail out when your funding goes for a toss, and therefore that was one of the biggest learning, short stint, but uh, it's a life learning in that, being in that role. Then of course was moving into Citigroup, who were trying to set up their global captive in India. This role provided me dual opportunities. One was that of being that I was the first officer as the CIO, and also heading a business role. So this was an understanding that anything that whatever earnings that you have by running the business role, one should be able to spend that in building the IT and the application infrastructure for the captive, which was just about to go global. So very difficult in a in a structured multinational, but that's how that entrepreneurial opportunity came about. So couple of things over here. We started off with testing, and then moved in value leftwards, going into requirements analysis, which gave us more margins, and on the right hand side, moving to service desks, because since you were doing testing, the product knowledge was with us, so we could go both ways, left and right. And therefore, how to build adjacencies was something that one picked up in adding value. But we never got business like GE did, like one third of your outsourcing automatically comes to your subsidiary. No, we actually competed with different service providers who used to do work for City. And that's in that responsibility, I had the first brush with process automation. We used to call it screen scraping those days, if you remember, this term used to be used.
Yeah,
Then,
yeah,
as part of corporate action, we moved to TCS. That was a time when the housing sort of bust happened in the US. Banks were badly hit. Big names fell off. And moving into this dual role, I continued to do the work of being, running the business role as well as being responsible for internal IT. But at one point of time, because of the structuring in the organization, parent organization, I moved into the CTO's office. Now, the CTO's office gave me another view of the entire world. So earlier you were seeing it from the lens of an internal IT provider, then you were doing services, and this one actually helped me work with the product teams of large OEMs, not looking at problems of today, but problems of tomorrow. Hence, a large part of it was part of the innovation programs that we did. And there I was sort of brought into the world of IPR, patents. And that also made a big change in how you looked at patents, more as a defensive mechanism, as well as how to have it differentiate in the marketplace. So uh, so have in TCS, obviously this particular role transcended all verticals, and therefore I had a chance to come back to energy and utilities. I did my electrical engineering, so at some point, this was bugging me, and therefore Tata Power was a natural progression or migration as its CIO. And in this, Tata Power is also an integrated group, which is across generation, transmission, distribution, renewables. It also manufactures, solar components, and at the same time also into power trading. So one was able to bring in one view of data with implementation of SAP across this entire group. And that was one achievement, including distribution franchises, which later came to the fore, so that we don't build islands as we grow along. Cybersecurity and different innovation opportunities, including using collaboration tools, making sure those were in place, so that remote working, we introduced remote working at that point of time, but we didn't know that pandemic was coming. So later on, I did get a feedback that it helped them immensely, because by that time they got used to 2 3 years of working in that platform, which is Microsoft's Office 365. And I know we had exchanged notes also at that time, how to push this to the user community. And then, of course, an opportunity came in my hometown, and therefore I moved from Mumbai to Kolkata, which is with the CSC Power Group. And mm, here again, in this intervening period, lots of challenges came, including the pandemic, as well as the cyclone, which was known as Amphan, which was not seen in the last 150 years of weather experience in the eastern parts of India. So we had a chance to use those the pandemic period to relook at processes, bring in a lot of a roadmap for process automation, so that once things sort of normalized, we were in a position to sort of move into the demonstrate and the deployment phase. Business continuity was also looked at as afresh, and therefore we are now in a program of the version 2.0, and implemented lots of on the contact center side chatbots, WhatsApp bots, and then finally voice bots, which is now living its life for almost 1 year now in using multilingual capabilities to interact with the consumer community. One important thing, the pandemic also taught us uh, how to move from sympathy to empathy. So talking to people down the line when they were, because they were not engaged, sitting at different locations, only talk about their health and well-being and not about the work. So I thought, so this was a capsule of sort of experiences that I could sort of
No,
relate and share with the
so thanks,
colleagues.
thanks, Sanjay, so much. In fact, that sets us up very nicely for the next question, which is around empathy. But then, let me quickly summarize. I my takeaways. So, guys, as you now know, Sanjay and I started both in Tata Motors, so we have the same roots, but different trees. And of course, Sanjay started before me. I think we never got a chance to work together. I believe, yeah. So you had moved out before I came in. But then, as you see, you know, I do see an element of courage and experimentation because he moved industries from automotive to consumer goods, from consumer goods to taking risk into a startup, and then coming out into banking, financial services, and then not moving back to your the comfort zone, which is actually consumer goods or FMCG, but then um, going into your core area, which is utilities. And then of course in the what we also see at the same time is moving across geographies, not being really locked onto a particular geography, moving from Jamshedpur to Calcutta to Bangalore to Mumbai, and I believe Delhi also, Sanjay, if I'm correct.
No, so Delhi and Chennai, I give a miss.
Ah, okay. And now back to Kolkata. So, and what we also see is that entrepreneurial instinct. We'll talk later about the entrepreneurial part of it, but then you know, building a business within city, which is about competing with others, and then building a process automation business completely. That's a great journey, Sanjay, and I think sets us up nicely into diving deeper into certain areas of which are like really stand out in your entire journey. So the first one, which is like again, um, across geographies, across industries, making a success of yourself. So you did mention when we were talking earlier about a childhood lesson in empathy or in the perspective of the other person, which actually happened to you, and which gave you a lifelong lesson in empathy. Just tell us about it, because I think that's a very deep one and very very important one in today's world.
Yeah, so I was actually in school, and we just moved from the primary to the high school, the two buildings separated by a lane. So my loyalty still lay with the primary school. Just gone into big school, high school. So there was a football match going on in the primary school between the two schools, primary and big. And At that time, I was also into, I had picked up chess from my dad. And since chess was not so popular, I think for the whole school there was three or four chessboards. I used to carry a chessboard from home. Now, this particular evening, the football match was happening in the primary school. So I used to carry the chessboard. So I took the chessboard along and went to the other school. And my dad came to pick me up. And for one more than an hour, he couldn't find me in the school, in the big school, in the high school where I'm normally supposed to be around. And I came back after all the match was over. I came back to the high school, and then I realized that something is amiss. So, of course, the chessboard was thrown all in the air, and then for one whole day, the next day, we were not talking to each other because he thought I have become an addict in chess, and I was playing chess after going out of school and playing chess with somebody, and that sort of addiction. And I tried to clear the air, but then he sat me through and explained where he was coming from and what sort of thoughts he was having in mind. And then I realized that I need to be in the other's shoes to really understand where he or she is coming from. And that has held me in good stead, whenever I get into these complex situations. Try to read the what the other person is saying. So some of these incidents which are in childhood do leave a mark, either good or bad.
Yeah, so I mean, but I think the important thing is that, like, after your dad sort of, gave you a piece of his mind,
Hmm.
he was still willing to listen to your part of the story. So
Yeah.
he listened to your part of the story. You listen to his concern, and I think there was this synchronization. I think that's a very important, process of empathy, that you don't assume or don't judge the other person unless you understand his or her point of view. So thanks for sharing that, Sanjay.
So this is
So
a rare
meanwhile,
occasion of chess and football getting into conflict.
yeah, yeah, yeah. This was like, going to a football match with a chessboard, and then you come back and your father thinks you're addicted to chess. And that's like, perception. The reality was something else. But I think the empathy comes when you reconcile those two different points of view. So I do see some more comments. So let me bring up some people here. Sanjay, so we have Senthil joining us from Bangalore. We have uh, Gautaman joining us from Chennai. We have Amit Mahajan joining us from CNH Industrial. And yes, we have a good friend of mine, Ramesh Ayagari, joining from Atlanta. Hey, thanks, Ramesh, for joining. Good to see you here. And we have some early words of AHA from Niti. Fantastic span of experiences, Sanjay. Thanks, Niti. Yeah, guys, please keep your comments coming. And while we move on to our um, our next question, and meanwhile, if any one of you has a question for Sanjay, the range of industries, technologies he has been in, the cultures he has interacted with. So, any kind of question related to his experience, industries, or any question that you may have, please keep them coming. So, um, Sanjay, another thing that stands out, when I was talking to you, is about stretching beyond your role. So especially, like, contributing to the industry. So when um, so I mean, I still fondly remember when we were like setting up the Tata Group CIO forum, and conducting, we did an event in Mumbai, and then I think next year you took over, and when I was not there, and you guys did one in Jamshedpur, I got to know about it. um, See, my question is, that there is always a stretch when you go beyond your usual role. Okay. And then you start, like, contributing to the industry, or like, being part of these working groups, or like, the consultative groups and all of that. So tell us a little bit about, what are those roles that you picked up for yourself, and what are the rewards, what are the challenges and rewards in doing those roles, and why should, I mean, again, coming from a takeaway to our audience point of view, why should somebody even do it?
So, maybe I don't, there was no cookie cut answer for this. But yes, one always used to look at what you're trying to do inside, and also look at what are the outside in influences that you need to manage. So one is the environment. The environment also means competition, the technology that vendors bring to the table. So one of the first items was, the SAP India Users Group. That's way back in the mid 90s. Colgate used to be a beta customer of SAP, but when SAP came into India, we realized that we were all trying to touch an animal in from different sides. It's like that elephant and the six blind men. So we thought there is a certain element of sharing of best practices, collaboration, and how to make the processes amenable for SAP is required. So one was that sharing of best practices. The second was to see that SAP comes at a price. So I don't know whether anybody from SAP would be here, but any customization that you would want in the Indian regulatory context was turning out to be very costly, and therefore this forum was used to bring in that that community in that Indian user community with SAP, saying that look, there are certain things which it's not that a particular country wants to make a change or customize. It's something which is mandated. So we need to have an extension of your product, and that's how country India version, and at that time it was called Sin 2. It was very sinful as far as SAP was concerned. Instead of being a customization, this became an extension to the product, and it was also, SAP being obviously the anchor for that group, also realized that this is the way to take it forward, and it helped in the overall partnership with the respective customers. It also brought in so-called competition together under one forum. The PNGs of the world, the Colgates of the world, and later on, levers also sort of came onto the SAP bandwagon. The Then the second instant was, when I was with City, we were running back offices both on the process side as well as on the voice side, contact centers. And we realized that we were not able to fungibly use our premises and the telecom infrastructure. And then we looked at competition, Genpact, HCL, Amex, and we realized that the situation is the same everywhere. So we got together, and initially we went under the umbrella of NASCOM, and finally, this later on, with the help from NASCOM, became part of the standing committee. So I was representing the industry as part of Department of Telecom standing committee, which looked at not from an individual player perspective, whether it is City, Amex, or Genpact, but it was more from India's competitiveness to deliver to the world, because we were not getting assignments in the way we wanted, because we are losing out to South Africa, Philippines, and Ireland, where the telecom guidelines were far more relaxed. So it actually ended up in formally notifications coming from the Department of Telecom, and we could actually use the same telecom infrastructure for both domestic and international processes, albeit with checks and balances. Obviously, nobody would make misuse of it, but yes, the checks and balances were also brought in. And work from home, which we now see, during the pandemic as a practice, this relaxation came way back in 2008, where work from home within the same telecom circle was allowed as a business contingency of your, if your premises, something happened or you lost your complete telecom infrastructure. So these were some of the things that really saw light of day, and we had a small contribution in it. And if you recollect, many industries need to have OSP licenses. This term would be very uh, so it's called other service providers. So we were also, after that we actually started this OSPI, that is the Other Service Providers Association of India, and I happen to be also a founder member there. And there also competition came together to sort of fund this, so that we could overall as a country be more competitive. And
Awesome, awesome.
Tata Group CIO forum, obviously you touched upon it, and I saw it more as a, so before that I was with TCS, which is obviously more on the service provider side. And when I moved to Tata Power, I realized that we were together trying to, but not getting the value out of a federated value, through best practices. We all know that governance played a big part, and we ought to follow those governance guidelines. But it helped us to provide one face to the major OEMs, and we ran very curated annual events. I think the one which we were together was digitalization in Mumbai, and then cybersecurity in Jamshedpur, Tata Steel. And in the spirit of the group, I happened to play host to the Tata Steel event at that point of time.
No, no, absolutely, absolutely. So I think the answer is very powerful, and to all our audience who are listening. So, guys, while you can do a 9 to 5 job, but in terms of your own competitiveness, which is picking up best practices, picking up benchmarks, it's always useful to be part of a sort of industry working group, or like at whatever working group. So look out for those opportunities where you are able to be a part of a forum which is beyond your company itself, right? So you will definitely pick up some best practices, benchmarks, and it will actually help you in doing your own work itself. And I think the other very important point of view that Sanjay brought in is the competitiveness of the industry itself. It is today, in today's world, it is countries and the industries within those countries competing with the same industry in another country. And so, from an industry competitiveness point of view, it's simple. Your organization's growth depends on the growth pattern that your industry gets into, and your industry's growth depends on, like this global, I would say, dynamic, where influencing the government policy, bringing together industry standards, etc. These play a sort of multiplier role. So I remember in my own stint, Sanjay, when you mentioned that the entire FMCG industry came together. Even the entire auto industry came together. Um, so Vijay was there, and I see a comment from Vijay here. I suspect it is Vijay only. So he talks about your Indus days, where he says, um, I'm just bringing in his comment. Very true. I remember interacting with Colgate team at that time. This must be Vijay Sethi. I know he's very. He's the one who hides his name here, and he's the one who has been very active in Indus. So Vijay, if
Obviously,
you're there, just shout out that, hey, Vijay here.
he's
No, but coming
synonymous
back,
in us. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, Vijay is synonymous with Indus. So again, like Vijay and I, around the time that we were doing the Tata Group CIO forum, a couple of years before that, we reinvigorated an initiative which was started in late 90s, early 2000s, around an automotive industry, pan automotive industry EDI initiative.
Okay.
I remember FMCG industry did it around between 2000 2005. I had read a report in Business Today about it, and but it was like so this industry, you have so many OEMs and you have so many suppliers, and these suppliers are supplying to all the OEMs. But because there are no common data standards, each supplier ends up accessing the partner portals of multiple OEMs, and creating data dumps specific to that OEM. From one system, we are taking up 5 different data dumps, uploading them in 5 different formats and all that. And we wanted to uh, standardize that. Actually, we went a long way, even setting up that platform along with IBM. But yeah, some of these things have to be looked at from an industry competitiveness point of view as well. But very good
Absolutely.
point made, Sanjay. Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
The common thread is increase the pie and then fight for it. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And first you have to believe that that the size of the pie can be increased, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that's a very very important lesson from Sanjay, which he mentioned. But it's very powerful, that collaboration. The underlying basis of collaboration is that the size of the pie is not fixed. the size of the pie is bigger, and when we collaborate with each other, we can increase the size of the pie, and then have a much bigger absolute, part of the pie, instead of looking at a greater percentage of that pie. Right? So very, very important one. So Sanjay, again, there is a question which we don't see here, but it is from Dr. Labh Singh. So he's asking a question to you. He says, how the trends in green energy will impact the traditional power sector? What are three major steps you think you can think of for a complete transformation to achieve net zero carbon as global target?
So this is a seminar by itself, the question, and I am also a learner in this whole journey. So I try to respond in the best way possible. Dr. Singh, actually, it does impact the traditional power sector, and that's the reason why we see, large sulfurization, desulfurization projects happening across the major generation industry units, and both in the government as well as in the private sector. But at the same time, if you look at the target which has been set, 2050, still ambitious. It was the deadline was earlier; it's got extended to 2050. It says that that is only possible if unabated coal-powered production is only possible by 2040. So that means coal production will still stay, but it has to be moderated by such projects that I just spoke of, desulfurization projects and other green initiatives. And at the same time, from a green energy perspective, one speaks of, by that time we might see something called the energy internet. It is still not, the term has still not caught on, which means that you would be able to not only run distributed energy resources like we do peer-to-peer trading through blockchain, have your own microgrids, but at the same time, electric vehicles, which will require battery storage, will can actually be a prosumer in a sense during uh, you know off sun hours to actually provide back to the grid, and etc. So this is as a very complex mechanism of give and take that will happen using the microgrid and the players in the microgrid. But at the same time, some of these technologies need to come to the fore at an appropriate time, because the battery storage technology is moving leaps and bounds, and we are seeing alternatives also coming up.
Absolutely.
So I don't have a complete answer for this, but yes, steps are being taken to sort of mitigate these changes over the next 2-3 decades.
Yeah.
I
No,
will
I,
be happy to
I,
have a conversation offline on this.
No, but I see this very insightful answer, Sanjay. And maybe if I want to add my two bits to it, earlier we had this entire client server technology, right? So you had computing resources right then and there, and then it moved to internet, all browser-based systems and all, and then came mobile phones with like very, very, very powerful local computing power, and now that works, very, very interactively with this whole internet world. You have a lot of edge computing power, and you also have the cloud computing power, and both of them work together beautifully. So I mean, I can, when you were saying this, I could i could I could sort of think about this analogy, that you have a lot of local storage, and you have like a global production, and then these two interact with each other and feed off each other.
So absolutely. So legislation has to match this as well as the technology. So I of course learned a lot in one of those IEEE sessions that I was a speaker in a few months back, and therefore maybe 5-6 years later, early shoots of energy internet would come into play.
Absolutely. That will be transformational. So there's another question from Debashis Mukherjee from SAP. He's asking, what is your take on generative AI on Industry 4.0? I'm sure you can do another conference on it.
Mm, see, I This is a very broad question, Industry 4.0. Whatever little I know of this, but let me tell you, Devashish, that generative AI. We have been talking of this lately for the last 3 4 months, but generative AI existed way back during the pandemic. In 2020, OpenAI came with the first, I think, 2.0, where 175 billion parameters could be set up using that version of GPT 2.0. So it was already something which was in the burner. It obviously with 3.0 it has now moved by leaps and bounds. With with respect to 4.0, let me talk with respect to the power industry, how we see it probably affecting. One is we expect OEMs, you know, to come out with much optimal equipment design, both in terms of the bill of materials, weights, and costs, which in turn should be passed on to players like us who use those equipment, and therefore there will be a sea change in how this whole affordability in the power industry will come into play. That's a big thing that should happen. The the second is, when we do uh, robotic process automation, and we are doing it for many processes within the utility industry as well as it's horizontal across industry. We talk of attended and unattended bots. Now, tomorrow, these attended bots could actually run off voice commands coming out of generative AI. It's still not even in the drawing board, but these are possibilities that one could see, how generative AI could affect. So instead of giving a global answer, I took two specifics where there could be interventions coming out of generative AI. And of course, apart from other things that we normally see that's happening today, of course, we need to vet or validate whatever output is coming today, because sometimes it goes off the whack in providing answers. But then you have specialists within every industry to really make sure that it is within the guardrails, that it is providing those solutions or options. The final decision should be yours and mine, and not the generative AIs.
No, absolutely, absolutely. By the way, there's a little bit of correction, Sanjay. The LinkedIn user whose name we could not see, whose message was, I remember interacting with Colgate team at that time, is actually Shankar Mandapaka and not Vijay Sethi. Okay, so I
Okay.
got that one wrong.
Thank you, Shankar. Okay, for your input.
So okay, so now let us get into one more area before I pick up more questions for Sanjay. By the way, guys, you can ask both types of questions to Sanjay. You can ask, like, mind-boggling questions, which tests is where you can, like, get some industry or technology specific answers. But you can also ask any kind of, rapid fires, anything that you want to know about Sanjay's life, which cities he stays in, which are his favorite actors, or any of that thing which kind of is like, you're curious about Sanjay. You can actually ask. I mean, one of my questions could have been that, Sanjay, did anyone ever tell you that you look like Sanjeev Kumar? So we can take that later. Sanjay, I just
But
giving some
you are
ideas
putting
to
me in
our
a
audience.
spot. You are putting me in a spot. This is turning out to be an unprepared Viva hosting.
Yes, of course. The rapid fires are always like that. Yeah. Okay. Um, so um, so I can see some questions coming, guys. Please keep sending your questions. I definitely give some time, but I think there's a very important one I want to ask Sanjay before I come to your questions. It is that, I see that very unique thing in Sanjay, and I do see that, cutting across is the entrepreneur spirit. And if you go way back when he mentioned that, he was running an internal P&L in Citigroup, and he was building that up, and he was competing with external service providers. So I want to dive a little deeper into that, Sanjay. That, you sort of became an entrepreneur within within Citi, handling a $50 million business. So what are
So
the top takeaways and learnings which have helped you in your future CIO roles
No,
after?
I'll tell you, the Kida came from the failed .com. So there we were providing
Okay.
services remotely to .coms in the US through a data center where we bought some rack space in the East Coast in Virginia. And we told the .coms, you do your business, we'll manage your IT and applications. So the model
Okay.
was very good as an application service provider. And we had customers. There were lots of receivables, but that was not getting turned into cash. You understand what I'm saying? So
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
how the P&L looked like, because it was post the boom where the check wasn't getting signed, the term sheet was getting drafted but not signed. So from that perspective, I thought there is a service component which I was planning to do, and I needed to continue. So in that discussion with at that point of time, this internal role plus running a revenue line of business, and that entity was a public limited company. So we used to present results to every board meeting every year, though it was part of the group. But getting that permission itself was completely far thinking on behalf of the parent company, because in a bank, how could you run an IT services company within a bank? So apart from doing shared services, so those learnings were tough, because we were told that it's not that just because you're a subsidiary you will get the business by default. So we had to fight with the known players at that point of time. You know, I don't know whether Emphasis was a big service provider to City at that point, including the biggies. Now the objective was to see how to train your internal IT team. The people you are wanting to choose must also have that kira or the passion to serve an external entity, because it's not, if you make a mistake there, it's permanent. If you make a mistake internal, you can still make corrections because it's all within the same subsidiary, housing, family, and all that stuff. And so that was one thing, to how to seat people from within the internal IT team to do business outside. Second was, instead of doing we didn't spend too much on marketing. It was all word of mouth. So if we were able to do for a particular business in EMEA, uh, we would of course do those rounds of meetings and make sure that North America also took up that, gave us that assignment, provided obviously everything for 2 3 years, the voice of customer, and also we were reasonably making some bottom line. Both of these had to map before we could take on. And adding US from beyond EMEA was a challenge, because you went into a different time zone. So the challenges of, you could not say, even today when you talk to a service provider, sometimes I get to hear, sir, I was late. I could not revert on time because I was talking with a client. I was dealing with a client. So what am I? I'm also a client, no? So that language we stopped completely. That every time zone customer is the priority customer. So irrespective of, so every time zone has to be given the due importance. It became a bit challenging when all three regions were added, but that gave us also a lot of maturity over the period. So we started from zero and ended up with this number over the years, and largely through uh, networking rather than through very extrovert marketing. We didn't do that, and that helped us understand a couple of more other things. That is, listen, listen, and listen, and then bring value to the customer. As I said, the model was, you move into a very small area testing, and then we moved leftwards, which is business requirements analysis. So we used to write English like requirements, which used to be then passed on to another developer. So here you see this, the conflict of interest was not there at all. So one, we used to design the specs, it used to go to a developer who would write the code, and then we would test. So you see this entire segregation of
Got it,
responsibility which
got it.
used to happen as part of the process. And once the product rolled out, we would provide the service desks for that particular product, because we knew the product, because we were writing the specs for the product. So
Yeah,
this
yeah,
so that is something that worked. That's
yeah.
in a small way,
So,
it's a push.
So yeah, so Sanjay, I mean, I got my takeaways, and I'm sure the audience did get there. So let me summarize my takeaways. I think the first one is like customer, customer, customer. So you cannot give any excuses to the customer, even if it is another customer, right? So you got to be
Hmm.
ready for the customer, and the moment you make that as like the holy grail, that it's the customer that I need to focus on, I think the rest of the organization's processes, priorities, everything gets aligned to that. So customer always works as a magnet. I have used it always. I mean, even from an IT point of view, where our internal customer, people say that the business doesn't know how to use technology, and I'm like, no, that's not true. Customer is always right. So if he's trying to use the technology in a different way, he is right. We probably need to see like why we are expecting him to use it another way. The second takeaway I got, Sanjay, was like about listen, listen, listen. So you have to be in a listening mode always. And third is this positive loop of adding value. So you always have to add value. It's not about getting revenue. I think the value that you add has to justify. Sorry, the revenue that you're getting really has to justify the value that you're adding to the customer. So if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to really like be a CEO, these three things if you focus on: customer, listening to all stakeholders, and then adding value more than what you earn, I think you'll be successful. Anything to add on that, Sanjay?
I'm just now that we're talking, a couple of things came into mind. Hiring, in each of the hirings, I used to be part of the hiring to at least if it is even three skip levels below, because the messaging had to be consistent, and so that it doesn't get diluted. So sometimes it added maybe a day or two to the entire process, but it made sure that we had a the thought process, the approach to the business was all consistent, and expectations were clear, and the messaging was clear. The other thing which, in order to avoid attrition was a challenge. So this concept of FPR and SPR, first person responsible and second person responsible, meaning if I'm the guy who's handling a particular module of a project or a project, and you're the second person, you're my backup. What I used to do is I used to review the backup, not the first person responsible. So if that backup was failing in his answers, that means that communication was not happening, and this whole concept was absolutely on paper. So this thing worked excellently.
That's a very smart one. Always test the backup. If the backup is ready, that means it has got all the inputs from the first one. That's
And the
absolutely.
primary guy is in the room. Primary guy is in
Yeah,
the room, but he's asked to keep quiet.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that cleared a lot of ego communication gaps. All that was sorted out.
yeah. So what we will do, Sanjay, we have some audience questions. Let's do it as a rapid fire. Okay, so let's just give like maybe a 2-3 line answer questions to each one of them, right?
Okay.
So we have Rushan Mehta. He's joined from you on YouTube from EY. He says, I specialize in M&A consulting, tech and IT. My question: how do you avoid technology debt? And once you've identified it, how do you mitigate it? Any
Hmm.
quick fire answer to that?
Yeah, I mean, technology debt is a reality because you have to flog the asset that you have paid for, and we are not in that comfort zone as a as a nation or as an industry that 3 years you write off. You have
Yeah,
to flog the asset as long as you can. At the same time, make sure that as long as it is not part of end of service life, so it's a so that's the guiding mechanism that one could follow.
yeah,
And for every refresh that you're planning to do, make sure that you plan in advance so that you need not make leapfrogging jumps. You can, if all these refreshes are actually concurrently ending at one point of time, but it requires very slick engineering on the
yeah,
team's part. Sometimes we struggle, we don't have people around, so make sure you can also do it in phases. But these are technology debt is a reality, and only thing is that you have to minimize the debt as much as possible. So there is a quadrant which helps us do that, where you you have something, it is running, there is no documentation, but it is serving its purpose. What do you do about it? Then there is something which it is broken. You may have documentation, and that probably would need an action to be done much earlier than the other one. So
Absolutely.
this
So
quadrant of what is residual life and what it is serving would help us take a call in most of the cases.
yeah. So Sanjay, I have to remind you rapid fire.
Acha, acha. Okay, okay.
No, no, that's okay. I think Rushan's question, I mean, you really answered very well the hardware part of it. I think on the software part of it, Rushan, let me take that quickly. Um, I think the reason technical debt becomes technical debt really is that there's no documentation. So if we are conscious that whatever we are building today is going to become a technical debt 5 years later, and we want to prevent it, then we got to document it. We got to really bring in rigorous documentation practices as part of your IT culture itself. I hope that answers your question. Now, I have the next one again, rapid fire, Sanjay. It is from Vijay Basu. He's asking, could you kindly share how CESC is promoting sustainability by supporting EV charging infra in Kolkata, West Bengal? Are we as we still see a very low EV charging point. So Vijay, as you can figure out, is from West Bengal. So he's not happy with the number of EV charging points.
So we were not using this platform to answer very company specific questions, but we can talk offline. But yes,
Oh,
we are promoting
we can
sustainability in
skip
a
that.
big
We
way.
can skip that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
in a big way,
Okay.
and we can talk offline on that
Yeah.
because
Okay. So Vijay, reach out to Sanjay afterwards, and he will be able to give you some answers. Yeah. So there is another one from Debashis. What was your toughest challenge as a CIO?
choosing your influencers in business.
Very, very important. Absolutely. So
Not It's not about technology.
it's not about technology. You need partners in business who will support you, who will push your agenda, who will be putting nice words, and you got to choose them carefully. Very, very good. I mean, I just realized, oh my God, yeah, this is such so important. Thanks, Sanjay, for that. And then we have another rapid fire from Vijay. He's asking, what keeps you up at night? Out of the three, choose one.
Cybersecurity.
Oh, absolutely. It just keeps everyone up at night. And let me come to my own rapid fires as well. One incident when sports came to your rescue.
Oh, again, it's a repetition. It's chess. I call it chess diplomacy.
Okay, tell us the
Where
incident quickly.
one very quickly, it was I was briefly posted in Kolkata in my earlier days in the 90s, and one of my tasks was to wind up it was still the regional eastern region headquarters for IT as well, and there's a lot of tea buying which used to happen from this center and all that. The business was still there, but the objective was to wind up the cost center, IT as a cost center, and reallocate the IT folks to the different user departments and businesses. And so this was, and in those days, there used to be those EDP allowances, where you used to come with a quote and used to get some EDP allowance, etc., etc. And I had just moved in to the organization, so I was seen as a guy who was sort of responsible for this. Then chess diplomacy helped. I didn't want it that way, so it was a tournament which was being held with largely the not very few officers, but a lot of it was basically run for the staff, and one or two officers also participated. I didn't know this segregation, but I liked chess, so I took part, and I happened to play uh, the gentleman who had won it for the last 2 years. and he was one of those fellows who was sort of blocking this move for his reasons. There's and this helped because we played 1-1, and then I was getting transferred to Bangalore to leave us Bangalore. So we said, this match was tied 1-1, and this helped in making him understand. For him, he was moving from one room to the other, or the entire staff was moving from one floor to another floor in the same building. For me, I had to move from my hometown to another city. So this logic, after the match, explaining it to him, he saw sense in it. So I was no more that intruder who was trying to, sort of execute a decision affecting them. So I was like part of them, and I was worse affected than they were. Now, it was not planned that way, but it sort of that's how this chess diplomacy panned out.
Oh yeah, and sports is always a great equalizer, and sports is actually what put you on the same pedestal in them, and sort of helped generate that empathy with those guys. So Sanjay, we are like 5 minutes over. I still don't want to let you go without before completing our entire agenda. So there is always this again an equalizer that I provide to my guests, which is that I'm the one asking you the question throughout. So you should be able to get to take some revenge as well. So what's your question to me?
I can take this liberty because we have been part of the group together for some time, Tata Group. So you at the time when we were trying to make a group-wide movement, you moved out from Tata Motors to GE, and then subsequently, you are now on your own. And so, what are the two things? One, with respect to customer focus in these three instances, and the second is in terms of uh, looking at business from a distance. How these two approaches, how did it change?
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. So, Sanjay, I'll not exactly answer you in that way, but I think you'll be able to get a sense of both of them. When I went to G, one of the biggest things that I found there was that there are no wildfires. In Indian companies, most of the time we are fighting fires. We are fighting fires, or and a lot of time we are being unreasonable. Like setting up impossible deadlines, and it's a lot more top down, and a lot more. And I can say that there is a little more chaos than what do you call than order. Okay, what I really found in G is that things were pretty calm actually. They were like the processes used to run like clockwork. There wasn't like there weren't any wildfires, like there was still a chaos sometimes, but that was only sometimes. Most of the time, your systems will work, your processes will work. There will be more order than chaos, and there will be a very reasonable level of internal negotiation between departments, or between bosses and employees and all of that. And what that really I found that is that really generated a sort of you can say collective accountability or acceptance of whatever the end result in terms of decisions were, right? Because you're not really imposing anything on anyone. And I did see the same thing, between business and IT, right? There were fairly, I would say, intellectual negotiations and discussions. And it was never, I never felt that IT is the second citizen or anything like that. Same thing from a customer point of view. I mean, very good processes. A lot of time creating stuff which adds value to the customer, especially on the digital side, creating a lot of digital solutions, and then set not just giving it to customers but also expecting value from the customer. And I really saw like a fairly, I would say, structured, process driven working. So that kind of percolated everywhere. I hope that answered your question,
Yeah,
Sanjay.
to some extent, yes. We'll pick it up offline in the Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
So guys, I mean, we are a little over, but thanks for your patience and thank you, Sanjay, for continuing to stay with me. Let me now summarize our session before I say bye to everyone. Yeah. We begin with introductions, and then Sanjay told us a little bit about CSC Power Group, and I think he, as an icebreaker, he talked about a freezer incident, which actually froze everyone because he brought in some, geopolitics into an MNC conference room. Again, a great lesson
No,
on
it was actually not politics. It was just congratulating them on the 2 decades. And the
geopolitics.
problem,
I would call it
and the
geopolitics.
trouble I had with not being able to make it to the other side, but it was easier moving to
I
this side.
agree.
Closer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, now that we are at the end of the session, we can actually mention that there was a Pakistani gentleman who was the CFO, and congratulating Bangladeshis didn't really go well with him. Anyway, so let's move on. We Sanjay shared his professional journey, and and some of the learnings from pandemic, how he has moved across industries, across geographies, and how he's where he is today. Again, he shared a lesson in empathy and perception versus reality, with this chessboard versus football game incident. You can look at that particular part of the some of this is for the people who are watching the recording, so you can actually watch that part. Yeah, again, we discussed about embracing responsibilities beyond one's formal role. The motivations are picking up best practices, benchmarks, protecting our organization with respect to the competitiveness of the industry itself, and the big lesson in engaging beyond your organization, as well as we talked about collaboration, is that increase the size of the pie and then get a greater absolute part of the pie rather than just fighting for percentages, right? We had a quick question answer about the green energy and net zero. Of course, that's a very big topic that needs to be taken up separately. We did discuss a little bit about two specific use cases on an audience question about generative AI and Industry 4.0. And then a very important discussion was when Sanjay shared his learnings from being an entrepreneur, which is about, focus on the customer, focus on listening, and uh, focus on listening and bring value to the customer, right? So getting into that positive loop. We had a question about from Rushin about technology debt. So Sanjay answered the hardware part of it, like how do you do those triages in taking your technology decisions, and purely from a software part of it, what you're building today will be technical debt tomorrow, and the only way to prevent it is by having a very rigorous documentation culture. Um, we uh, we are going to take another discussion offline from Vijay about the EVs. um, Debashish asked what was his toughest challenge as a CIO, and that was like getting influencers from the business to buy into your agenda. And we know now what keeps Sanjay up at night is cybersecurity. And of course, then we had a reverse question from Sanjay to me, which I just answered, which was about like the difference between Tata Motors and GE. G being a global organization, far more mature and far more balanced conversations, much more, process oriented, very structured. By the way, I missed one thing, Sanjay, there. One of the reasons I went from Tata Motors to GE was I had done so much work in Tata Motors, but I thought that there is that, global organizations are doing much better, much bigger. But I did see that, once I went to GE, one of the biggest uh, learnings I got from that is that no, even as Indian organizations, sometimes we are much better. So our IT management was far better and far more employee centric, and far, I would say, less bureaucratic compared to what GE is. I mean, we don't mince any words when we are in Clarity Chat. So let's end at that note. So, guys, I mean, don't feel sort of like don't feel that we being in India, are not better than others. Many ways we are, especially in IT, we are much better than others. Sanjay, any closing words from you before I close the session?
No, I this has been very interactive, and I must thank Jagdish for the way you moderated this, especially getting those questions from the audience and totally coming out of the blue. So yes, so though I was sitting, I was on my toes.
No, thank you, Sanjay, and thank you to all my audience for attending and engaging. And for all of you who are watching the recording, a big thanks to you too. Please enjoy your weekend and family time as we go back to ours. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sanjay, for being part of Clarity Chat.